I slapped a human prisoner to humiliate her. 20 seconds later, she had me face down in cafeteria filth, begging for backup. Look, I'm not claiming to be the toughest enforcer on Station Vermilion 7, but I was definitely among the top 3. My name is Kravar, and yes, that apostrophe is absolutely necessary. Thank you. I had been assigned to detention for about 6 cycles, which in your Earth time is roughly 4 years, give or take a few months depending on the calendar. The point is, I knew my job. I knew it well. Very well, actually. The Vicien Conquerat doesn't hand out enforcer positions to anyone with 4 limbs and a bad attitude. No, we have standards. Protocols. A reputation that stretches across 17 star systems. And I, Kravar of the 3rd Talon, represented everything a detention enforcer should be: strong, intimidating, efficient, and not someone you cross during meal distribution hours. Station Vermilion 7 wasn't exactly the crown jewel of Conquerat infrastructure. To be honest, it was a mid-level detention facility. The kind of place where petty smugglers, tax evaders, unlicensed cargo haulers, and the occasional fool forging travel documents ended up. We weren't housing dangerous warlords or system-threatening criminals. Most of our guests, and I use that term loosely, were simply foolish, staggeringly, almost impressively foolish. The station itself was a massive cylinder, rotating slowly to generate artificial gravity. Cells lined the outer ring, while common areas, the cafeteria, and offices occupied the inner sections. Gray walls, gray floors, gray ceilings. Whoever designed this clearly had a close personal relationship with the color gray. Thrilling. My job was straightforward: keep inmates in line, distribute meals, prevent fights, file reports, and occasionally escort someone to interrogation or processing. Not glamorous, but it paid well, and I got to feel important. What more could a mid-level enforcer want? Then she arrived. Kira Torres. Human female. About 1.6 meters tall, which is average for her species. Brown skin, dark hair tied back in a knot, and eyes that appeared nearly black under the station's artificial lights. She was small, almost comically so compared to most species we housed. For reference, I am 2.3 meters tall. My arm span alone was wider than she was tall. The intake officer, a Belverin named Thaz, brought her through during second shift. I was reviewing security feeds in the monitor room when I noticed her shuffling down the corridor in standard-issue detention wear, those ugly gray jumpsuits we made everyone wear. No personal effects, no baggage. Just her, and that neutral expression like she was waiting for public transport instead of being processed into a Conquerat detention facility. They handed me her file. I glanced at it: unauthorized presence in conquered space, falsified transit credentials, unregistered vessel, the usual nonsense from independent operators who thought the rules didn't apply to them. Her ship had been impounded, and she faced a minimum of 60 cycles before her case went before a magistrate. Standard, boring stuff. I observed her through the window. She stared straight ahead, not fidgeting, not looking around nervously like most new arrivals. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic community, only about 40 cycles since first contact. Most species still considered them curiosities, soft, fleshy beings from a heavy-gravity world that somehow built faster-than-light engines before unifying their own planetary government. Weird priorities, if you ask me. I had processed maybe a dozen humans before Kira. They were always polite, always compliant, always anxious. Humans had a reputation for stress in detention environments. They sweated excessively, talked too much, and asked far too many questions. They were, with all due respect, somewhat pathetic. Naturally, I assumed Kira Torres would fit the same mold. I activated the intercom. Inmate Torres, you are assigned to Cell Block 7, Unit 42. You must follow all station regulations, obey enforcer commands, and avoid causing any problems. Do you understand? She looked straight at the camera, her expression unchanged. Sure, she said. That was it. Not, yes, sir, not, I understand, not, please do not hurt me. Just, sure, like I had asked if she wanted an extra ration. I should have noted it. I really should have. But I didn't, because based on my experience with countless inmates, Kira Torres seemed like any other small, weak human, someone who would keep her head down, serve her time quietly, and avoid trouble. She would be easy to manage, forgettable even. I assigned her to Cell Block 7 and returned to monitoring the feeds. That was my first mistake. My second mistake was assuming that something that looks harmless actually is harmless. But we'll get to that soon enough. Oh yes, we definitely will. Station Vermilion 7 ran on a strict schedule. Apparently, the conquering authority believed rigid routines built character or prevented riots, or something equally philosophical. Wake cycle at 0600 hours. Meal distribution at 0700 and 1500 hours, recreation from 1400 to 1600 hours, and lights out at 2200. Every day, exactly the same. Most humans took at least a week to adjust, bumping into walls and complaining about the food. Kira adapted within 2 days, which was impressive. She woke on time, ate without comment, spent recreation performing strange bodyweight exercises in the corner, and returned to her cell without causing a fuss. It irritated me. I can't fully explain why. Perhaps it was how she avoided eye contact but somehow always seemed aware of everyone's position. Or how she never asked questions, never requested anything, and never showed fear or uncertainty. She was too calm, too controlled. It felt disrespectful. So, I began testing her with small things, professional boundary setting. During meal distribution, I would deliberately give her slightly smaller portions. She never complained. She simply took her tray and sat down. I began scheduling unannounced cell inspections during her designated rest period, forcing her to stand in the corridor while I deliberately took my time reviewing her noticeably empty cell. She would remain there with her hands behind her back, eyes fixed on the wall, waiting. There was nothing, no response, no visible emotion, no acknowledgement of my authority. By the 5th day, I started adding verbal reminders about her status here. Move faster, human. You're delaying the line, inmate. Is your hearing impaired, Taurus, or are you simply incompetent? She complied at once each time, but there was something in her gaze. It wasn't fear, and it wasn't anger either. It felt more like she was storing information for later, analyzing, calculating. I didn't like that. On day 7, Vex, one of the Kthari guards on 3rd shift, pulled me aside. The Kthari are an insect-like species with compound eyes and far too many joints in their limbs. Vex was reasonably tolerable for a bug. Kravar, maybe ease up on the human female. I laughed, actually laughed. What was she going to do, cry? Submit a complaint? Vex's antennae twitched in that nervous way their kind has. Humans originate from a Class 12 death world. Their baseline physical abilities are well above average for their size category. I've read the species briefings. It may be wise to keep professional distance. Professional distance, from a human who barely reached my chest. Vex, I appreciate your concern, but I've been doing this job for 6 cycles. I can manage one small human female. He clicked his mandibles together, the Kthari equivalent of a shrug, and walked away. I should have listened to him. That went onto my growing list of errors. By day 9, I was actively searching for reasons to interact with Kira Torres. It had turned into a kind of game, a contest of resolve. She wanted to appear unaffected. Fine. I would push until she broke. Then came day 10, midday meal distribution in the cafeteria. The common area was crowded, around 60 inmates at the tables, multiple species, all consuming their nutritionally complete but aggressively tasteless food. I was supervising, circling the perimeter, projecting control. Kira was seated alone at a corner table, eating slowly and deliberately, as always, alone, quiet, observant. I walked over and stopped beside her table, well inside her personal space. Inmate Torres, you are seated in a restricted zone. She looked up, chewed, and swallowed. There are no restricted zones in the cafeteria during meal hours. It states that in Section 7 of the detention regulations. She was quoting regulations to me. To me. Are you arguing with an enforcer, inmate? No. I'm correcting your error. The cafeteria fell silent. Several inmates turned to watch. This had become a spectacle. My crest flared, a Phexian threat display. Stand up. She rose slowly, still holding her tray, still entirely composed. You think you're clever? You think memorizing regulations allows you to disrespect me? I have not disrespected you. I stated a fact. My hand moved before my mind could intervene. It wasn't a punch, just a slap. An open palm meant to humiliate, not harm. Just enough to remind her who held authority here. My hand struck her face. Her head snapped to the side. And that, as the saying goes, was when everything unraveled. The slap produced a sharp, satisfying crack that echoed through the now silent cafeteria. My palm stung afterward, which surprised me. Striking something that small shouldn't have offered that much resistance. Her skin was tougher than it appeared, denser in a way I had not expected. Still, the point had been made. I anticipated tears, perhaps pleading. I thought she might collapse, hold her face, and finally display the kind of fear that felt appropriate. That was how the other humans had reacted. That was how weaker species responded when reminded of their place. Kira's head snapped to the side from the strike, her dark hair slipping loose from its tight knot. For a brief moment, no more than half a second, she remained still, turned away, unmoving. Then she rotated her head back toward me slowly, with clear intent, and she smiled. It was not a pleasant smile or a friendly one. It was the expression of a predator that has just recognized an opportunity. Her lip was slightly split, a thin line of blood trailing down to her chin, and she made no effort to wipe it away. "Okay," she said calmly. "Just that." "Okay." Her meal tray hit the floor with a sharp noise. I had perhaps 1 second to register the sound before she acted. There is something about humans that was apparently overlooked in the species briefings, or perhaps I did not study them carefully enough. They are fast. Not fast like a Cretari or a Vixillion, but fast in a way that is unexpected when dealing with something so small and seemingly fragile. One moment she was standing there, and the next her hand was gripping my wrist. My wrist, the same one attached to the hand I had used to strike her. Her fingers tightened, and I felt my bones compress, producing immediate and intense discomfort. I tried to pull back. This was a reflex. When something grabs you, you withdraw. It is a basic survival response common to most species. My arm did not move. This human female, this small woman who could not have weighed more than 60 kilograms, had secured my wrist as if it were fixed in place. "Let go, inmate," I said, attempting to sound firm. My voice came out slightly higher than intended. She did not release her grip. Instead, she stepped closer, inside my effective range, and her other hand moved quickly, extremely quickly. Her palm struck the underside of my elbow, forcing the joint past its normal range. Pain surged up my arm, sharp and immediate, blurring my vision at the edges. I swung at her with my free hand, a wide punch with considerable force, one that should have connected with her head and ended the situation. She avoided it easily, dropping perhaps 15 centimeters as my fist passed over her and hit only empty air. The momentum pulled me slightly off balance. That was when she kicked me. It was not exaggerated or showy, just a direct, efficient strike to the side of my knee. I heard a pop, not a break, fortunately, but a sound that knees should not make. My leg gave way. I remained upright, barely, struggling to understand what was happening. This was not proceeding as expected. This was not how it was supposed to go. Humans were supposed to be fragile. Easy to intimidate. Expected to crumble when faced with superior size and strength. Kira Torres clearly hadn't received that memo. She released my wrist at last, but only because she needed both hands for what came next. She grabbed the front of my uniform, twisted her hips, and pulled. A throwing maneuver. Later, I recognized it as some kind of martial practice from Earth. At the moment, all I registered was the floor hurtling up toward my face. I slammed down hard. Air blasted out of my lungs in a thoroughly undignified whoosh. My vision shimmered at the edges. Somewhere behind me, other inmates were shouting, some cheering, others moving chairs aside to give us space. I tried to rise. I really did. Hands planted, I pushed. Then Kira's knee pressed into my back, right between the shoulder blades, pinning me flat. How much does this woman weigh? It felt like a cargo loader had parked on my spine. "Stay down," she said. Calm, measured. No strain, no heavy breathing. Just a matter-of-fact instruction, like commenting on the weather. My training kicked in. Sort of. I struggled, trying to shake her off. She shifted effortlessly, and suddenly I couldn't move at all. One hand seized my left arm, twisting it behind my back at an angle that made my shoulder scream. Not dislocated, but nearly. "Stay down," she repeated. The cafeteria had erupted into chaos. Inmates shouting, some laughing. Emergency klaxons wailed, signaling that someone had called for enforcer backup. Reinforcements were coming. I just had to endure this brief humiliation until they arrived and restrained this relentless human. I counted seconds in my head, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Kira remained unmoved, kneeling on my back, controlling my arm, infuriatingly calm. My face was pressed against the cold cafeteria floor. I could see food scraps, an unidentifiable liquid, and the base of a table leg. This was my view. This was my life. A top enforcer of the Vicien Concordat, flattened in cafeteria filth, pinned by someone a third of my size. Where was backup? How long does it take for an emergency alert to be answered? Finally. Boots pounded down the corridor. Multiple sets, security was arriving. From the moment I hit the floor to complete humiliation, 20 seconds was all it took. Kira Torres had destroyed my reputation, my dignity, and perhaps even my knee cartilage. And she didn't break a sweat. I had crossed this cafeteria floor thousands of times at Station Vermilion 7. I had mopped it, inspected it, and filed maintenance reports about the staining in the northwest corner. But never, not once, had I seen it from this angle, face pressed to the tiles. It was not an improvement. A small crack near my left eye spiderwebbed outward, probably from some old impact. A fragment of vegetable matter, or maybe a supplement, was lodged in the grout. The smell was a mix of industrial cleaner and despair. Mostly despair. From this vantage, I could hear everything clearly: chairs scraping, inmates chatting in at least 4 languages, someone laughing, a high-pitched Belveran laugh that went on far too long. Another inmate was taking bets on what would happen next. The odds were not in my favor. Kira's knee remained firmly pressed between my shoulder blades. My arm was twisted at a precarious angle. Every attempt to shift even slightly resulted in increased pressure. It was like being restrained by a machine, calculated, unfeeling, effortless. The security team burst into the cafeteria. I recognized the footsteps: us, the Belvar intake officer, Gina, a Vexillian female with more combat training than the rest of us combined, and Vex, of course. Vex, who had warned me. Vex, whose advice I had ignored. Vex, probably feeling multiple conflicting emotions right now. Freeze. Everyone stays exactly where they are. That was Jenna, her voice sharp and commanding, effective, unlike mine, which had failed me completely. On the floor, I tried to explain that I was the victim, that this inmate had assaulted an enforcer. What came out was more of a wheeze. The human female is restraining enforcer Var, someone announced, accurate but unnecessary. Everyone could see it, some even recording it on personal devices, clearly against regulations. No one seemed to care. Jackenna approached cautiously, stunner drawn. Inmate Torres, release the enforcer and step back with your hands visible. To my shock, Kira complied immediately. The pressure on my back vanished. My arm was released gently and lowered back to my side almost carefully. She took 3 steps back, raised her hands to shoulder height, and said calmly, complying with instructions. I lay there for a moment, trying to remember how to breathe and whether my spine was supposed to feel like this. Slowly, painfully, I pushed myself to hands and knees, then stood. My knee immediately reminded me of that pop with a sharp spike of pain. I wobbled. Vex caught my arm, steadying me. His compound eyes were unreadable, but I could feel judgment radiating from him. Jaka kept her stunner trained on Kira while Foss moved through the crowd. I need witness statements. What happened here? An older Kathari male raised a limb. The enforcer struck the human female without provocation. She defended herself. It was over in approximately 20 seconds. Another inmate corrected, 15 seconds. I counted it. Someone else insisted, definitely 20. They were arguing over the exact duration of my humiliation. Fantastic. A minority female, all 4 eyes blinking in sequence, added, the enforcer has been harassing inmate Torres for 9 days. Reduced meal portions, verbal reprimands, unnecessary cell inspections, these had become routine. Today, however, he invaded her personal space during the meal period. She cited regulations. He responded aggressively. Foss was documenting everything on his data pad. Jackenna glanced at me, then at Kira, then back at me. Her expression stayed professionally neutral, but the subtext was clear: you idiot. Enforcer Kravar needs a medical assessment. Jackenna spoke into her comm unit, non-emergency but priority response. Non-emergency. I had just been taken down by an inmate, and somehow, that qualified as non-emergency. My career was burning, and someone had decided it wasn't urgent enough to intervene quickly. Within minutes, the medical technician arrived, a Havarian, naturally, since they relished documenting new and unusual injuries. He scanned my knee with his analyzer, making disapproving clicks with his tongue. Then he moved to my shoulder, more clicking, before checking my vitals. Hyperextended knee. Minor ligament strain. Shoulder joint stressed but intact. Bruised ribs, likely from hitting the floor. Elevated blood pressure and heart rate, though probably emotional rather than physical trauma. He spoke the last part a little too loudly. Jackenna asked about treatment recommendations. Anti-inflammatory injection, compression support for the knee, light duty for 5 to 7 days. And, perhaps, avoid physical confrontations with humans from high-gravity worlds. Just a suggestion. Everyone nearby was definitely not laughing. Definitely not. That strange wheezing sound? Probably just the ventilation system. Jackenna turned to Kira, who had remained still, hands raised, expression maddeningly calm. Inmate Torres, explain your actions. Kira lowered her hand slowly. Enforcer Kravar struck me without legal justification. I defended myself using the minimum force necessary to neutralize the threat and prevent further assault. I restrained him until the proper authorities arrived and then fully complied with security instructions. Minimum necessary force. That was all I had used. I shuddered to imagine what maximum would have looked like. I want her charged with assaulting an enforcer, I said. My voice was sharper than intended, likely due to the pain in my body and the bruised pride somewhere under the nearest table. Jackenna looked at me, really looked at me. Kravar, there are 60 witnesses and complete security camera coverage. I suggest reviewing the footage before filing any formal charges. That was the moment I realized. Justice wasn't coming. Only consequences, and they were mine, not Kira's. The medical tech finished wrapping my knee. You should sit down and restrain her. Take weight off that leg. I dropped to the floor again, deciding that standing was overrated anyway. Kira Torres remained standing, a small cut on her lip the only sign that anything had occurred, waiting calmly for what would come next. Commander Pelix was not someone you wanted reviewing footage of your worst moments on duty. She was a varnish, 4 arms, excellent multitasking skills, and zero tolerance for incompetence. Her office smelled faintly of the mineral supplements her species consumed. The walls were lined with commendations, incident reports, and one very clear poster reminding everyone that professionalism was mandatory. I sank into the chair across from her desk, my knee throbbing despite the anti-inflammatory injection. Jacquena stood to my right. Kira Torres remained on my left, still in her gray jumpsuit, still unnervingly composed. Pelix had watched the security footage 3 times from 4 different camera angles. Each replay felt like a new nightmare. The slap looked harsher from above, the throw more brutal from the side, and my wheezing painfully clear on the audio feed. Her primary arms folded across her chest while her secondary arms manipulated the display. Would you like to revise your statement that you were, and I quote, viciously attacked without provocation? I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again, nothing useful came out. Pelix didn't wait. She pulled up another file, stamped with official Concordat seals. After that, I actually read inmate Torres's full file, not just the intake summary. Kira Torres, human female, 28 years old, former member of Earth's Marine Corps. Served 8 years with specialized training in close-quarters combat, hand-to-hand techniques, and advanced combatives instruction. Certified to train other soldiers in unarmed combat. Pelix looked up from the display. She taught combat professionally for years. My stomach, already somewhere near my knees, dropped further, possibly through the floor. Pelix continued, clearly enjoying my discomfort. Humans come from a planet with gravity approximately 1.3 times standard. Their bone density is higher, muscle composition adapted for sustained high-intensity activity. They are naturally stronger than they appear. Vix had tried to warn me about humans being from a death world. I had laughed. Really laughed. After her military service, Torres worked as a private security contractor, then attempted independent cargo operations, which is how she ended up here, on falsified documentation charges. Pelix closed the file. To summarize, you verbally harassed, abused, and physically struck a trained combat specialist quietly serving her detention without incident. When she said it like that, it sounded undeniably bad. Commander, I was trying to maintain discipline, I muttered. Slapping an inmate in front of 60 witnesses didn't exactly reinforce that point. I had no defense. Pelix turned to Kira. Inmate Torres, do you wish to file a formal complaint against Enforcer Krivar? Kira paused, then shook her head. No, Commander. I think he has learned his lesson. The humility and mercy of that statement hurt worse than my knee. Pelix said, I am filing a formal reprimand in your record. Krivar, you are reassigned to inventory management, effective immediately. No direct inmate contact for the rest of your time on this station. Dismissed. I limped out feeling as though I had been fed through a waste processor. The news spread through Station Vermilion 7 faster than a hull breach alarm. By evening, everyone knew, the enforcer who got taken down by the tiny human, the guard who learned that size doesn't matter. That idiot Krivar. My first shift in inventory management was the next day. I arrived early, hoping to avoid stairs. No such luck. The route passed cell block 7, common areas, and the cafeteria, where it all had happened. Inmates stared, whispered, some nodded, not at me, but past me, toward Kira Torres. When I reached the recreation area, I stopped. Inmates were exercising differently now, mirroring Kira's movements, push-ups, squats, planks, and positions I couldn't name. A Manari struggled with a pull-up, all 4 eyes squinting in focus. They were learning from her. The human who had taken down an enforcer in 20 seconds had become the most respected inmate, not through violence, intimidation, or threats, but through skill and example. Through competence, or what I convinced myself was competence, I ended up in inventory management, counting supply crates and filing equipment requests alone. Away from everyone. Exactly where I deserved to be. My reputation wasn't just damaged, it was obliterated, scattered across the station like debris from a failed docking procedure. And the worst part? Entirely my own fault. Inventory management, it turns out, is painfully dull. Thrilling revelation, I know. Days spent scanning crates, updating databases, confirming that yes, we indeed had 17,000 units of meal supplement powder in Storage Bay 3. Riveting work. Truly a chance to put my enforcer training to full use. Here, over the next 3 weeks, my knee healed. The physical pain faded. The emotional damage, however, lingered like a stubborn stain on a uniform. Every time I moved through the station, I felt the weight of everyone's awareness. The story hadn't died down, in fact, it had grown. Somehow, in retellings, the fight had lasted 30 seconds instead of 20, and Kira had thrown me through a table. Neither was true, but truth is apparently optional when it comes to station gossip. I saw her occasionally, Kira Torres, the human who had permanently shifted my understanding of the universe. Always polite when we crossed paths. A small nod, nothing more. No gloating, no mockery, just quiet continuation of her routine. Somehow, that made it worse. The other inmates treated her with a respect I'd never earned in 6 cycles of service. She hadn't demanded it, threatened anyone, or established dominance through force. She had simply shown capability when challenged, and everyone noticed. Funny how that works. I even started reading the species briefings during downtime. The human sections were fascinating in a horrifying way. Earth classified as a Class 12 death world. Humanity had evolved alongside apex predators, surviving climate extremes, developing endurance hunting techniques that involve chasing prey to collapse from exhaustion. Persistently, stubbornly, aggressively alive in ways most species never needed to be. And we had invited them into the galactic community, ships, trade agreements, technology. What could possibly go wrong? 60 cycles into her detention, Kira's case finally went before a magistrate. I wasn't present, but I learned the outcome. Charges were reduced. Falsified documentation, first offense, mitigating circumstances involving corrupted navigation data that wasn't technically her fault. She was released with time served and a fine that had apparently already been paid. I saw her on departure day, collecting personal effects, signing release documents. Her ship had been returned, or what remained after impound fees and maintenance. She wore civilian clothes now, dark pants, a jacket with unfamiliar patches, boots that looked like they'd walked across continents. Our eyes met. She paused. Then she walked over. Here it comes, I thought. The final humiliation, some cutting remark about picking on someone my own size, or a reminder that she had taken me down without effort. Instead, she extended her hand, a human gesture, a peace offering. No hard feelings, Krivar. You were just doing your job. Well, mostly. I stared. Then, carefully, I shook it. Her grip was firm, very firm. My wrist bones remembered that grip well. For what it's worth, I said slowly, I'm sorry. For the harassment, the slap, for being, generally a complete idiot. She smiled. A real smile this time, not the predator grin from the cafeteria. We all make mistakes. What matters is learning from them. Then she left. I just walked out of Station Vermilion 7, returning to whatever life awaited me in the wider galaxy. I never saw her again. Yet, that day lingers in my mind, about assumptions, underestimating others based on appearances, and how the universe is full of species we barely comprehend, with abilities we have yet to recognize. Earth is just one planet among billions, and humans are one species among thousands. And still, they escaped a gravity well that should have kept them grounded. They built ships that traversed the stars. They endured environments that would have killed more delicate species. They perfected combat techniques honed over thousands of years of conflict. Then they joined the Conquerad, hauling cargo, running businesses, quietly going about their lives, as if they hadn't introduced something inherently dangerous to the galaxy. Something resilient, determined, and capable of striking back when provoked. I am Krivar of the 3rd Talon, inventory specialist at Station Vermilion 7. And I learned a crucial lesson from a human female barely tall enough to reach my chest: never underestimate the species from the death world. They've survived impossible odds long before we even knew they existed. And if you're foolish enough to start a fight with one, make sure you can finish it, because they absolutely will respond. Trust me. I have the medical reports to prove it.